All I wanted to do was go to the movie theater on a Sunday afternoon and watch the movie that I actually wanted to see this week. Unfortunately, that experience was ruined by a bunch of losers who don't know when to shut the f*** up. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Right off the bat, we'll start with a public service announcement of sorts. If you are a person who goes to a movie to socialize with your friends, then please stay the f*** home. If you are a parent who has raised a teenager who has no respect for the people around them, then please don't drop them off unsupervised at a movie theater. If you plan on laughing at each other, yelling at the screen, and running up and down the aisles every 5 minutes, throughout the entire course of the movie, basically like you're doing a reenactment of that scene from Scary Movie, unironically, then please stay the f*** home. It's not funny, it's not cute, and you are nothing more than a burden on society at that point. You are wasting everyone you are interrupting's time and money, and let's face it, movies aren't cheap now. So obviously, I didn't have the best experience while watching The Boogeyman. But being the person that I am, I'm going to try to do a review for it anyway. It's like studying for a test with a gnat buzzing around your head for an hour and a half straight. I was basically pleading with someone to please get me a can of off.
If he dies, he dies.
Anyway, The Boogeyman follows high school teenager Sadie and her little sister Sawyer as their grieving family is haunted by the sinister entity that feeds off their grief and suffering. And it is of course based on a story by Stephen King. Now, Stephen King adaptations are hit or miss, and more often than not they miss. For every great one, like It Chapter 1, we have the abysmal, most recent Pet Sematary remake.
That is one big pile of shit.
Truthfully, it takes a special kind of director to adapt his stories properly. I mean, you have the GOATs like Frank Darabont, and the newcomers like Mike Flanagan and Andy Muschietti, all of whom have done a great job in their respective projects. But this time around, we have a fairly newcomer in Rob Savage at the helm, and I thought he did a decent job. There's something about a Stephen King story that always shines through, and it lets you know that it's one of his stories even if you don't know.
That makes sense.
It can be little story things like having excessively mean bullies, which this movie has, or someone dealing with some kind of past trauma or addiction, which this movie has. Even with all that, I'd have to say, even if I didn't know, to me this movie just didn't feel like a Stephen King story to me. It is very reminiscent of the type of horror movie that Hollywood currently makes a lot of.
Not impressed.
So there are a lot of familiar character and plot points that some might consider cliche. Now, I can usually get past that kind of stuff in horror movies more than any other genre, mostly because I find myself being most easily entertained by horror. Basically, it doesn't take much for me to walk out of one of these movies satisfied. And I thought to myself going in, at best, this movie will be this year's Smile, a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. And at worst, it will be just another horror movie that I've now used to kill a Sunday afternoon.
Don't waste my time!
And once it was all said and done, and again take into consideration my horrible theater experience, I actually found The Boogeyman to be somewhere in the middle. Playing in the middle ground has got me in trouble in the past, but here I am again. Because God forbid you have a nuanced opinion that doesn't jump to extremes. Truthfully, there were things about this movie that I liked, and things about this movie that I didn't like.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
As far as what I did like, I thought the acting was above average compared to what we usually get in movies like this. The main character of Sadie, as I already stated, is a bit of a cliche. The type of character that we've seen in these trauma horror movies quite often. Putting all that aside though, I thought she was very effective in the role. I actually did feel her grief quite often. Which is all you could really ask for because that's basically all she was there for. Now she does make questionable social decisions, like inviting bullies who made fun of her mom dying into her house.
But why?
But we're just gonna chalk that up to a teenager who's dealing with a lot and just wants to try to be normal for a night. Her little sister Sawyer is played by the little girl who played young Leia in the Obi-Wan series. And let's just say she has considerably better material to work with this time around. Her laughable chase scene through the woods in Obi-Wan is rectified here when she is tormented for an hour and a half by the Boogeyman in this film.
Get what you deserve!
The other thing that I enjoyed about this movie was the tense atmosphere and the way that it handles jump scares. This is a dark movie, maybe not as dark and depressing as Smile was, but you can't help but feel dread based on how the movie is presented to you visually. Also, the jump scares are the good kind of jump scares, the ones that you don't see coming predictably a mile away. They could have been even better had they not shown most of them in the trailer, but unfortunately showing too much in movie trailers has become an all too familiar thing.
Stop it!
As for the creature itself, I'm a bit torn on that. I like the overall design. It comes off very much like something out of Resident Evil or Silent Hill, and I love the fact that they don't show the creature a lot, which is a mistake that a lot of movies make. To me, hiding it in the shadows like they do here is much more effective, and it covers up one of the glaring issues I have with the creature, that being it is created with CGI.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
I know, CGI is just easier now, but I'm gonna keep preaching the return of more practical effects until it happens, because I think movies will be better off for it. This movie also does some interesting things with light, which makes sense considering it is a stay in the light type movie. Whether it be the glowing orb light that the little girl rolls around her room, or the Christmas lights that she wraps herself in at one point, they find creative ways of using light to build tension. And I really appreciated that.
I like it a lot.
There's also a scene where they flip the whole routine of tying a string around your tooth and tying the other end around a doorknob and slamming it in order to remove a loose tooth. And I thought it worked considering how important the use of doors are in the film. The tooth on a string thing does come back later on in the film in a scene that makes a lot less sense.
I don't get it.
But I thought the setup to that was a nice touch. Apparently this movie was meant to be on streaming initially, and given its presentation, I can kinda see why. Now I'm glad that it was released in theaters because it probably would have just gotten lost in the shuffle on streaming. And let's be honest, you could make a boatload of money with a horror movie in theaters because it doesn't cost a lot to make them. But I did find a good portion of this movie to be a bit dull. Now this could be my frustration talking after having to listen to the social gathering in the back of my theater.
Shut up. Get out.
But a lot of this movie, again, did come off as a bit cliche to me, and that is its biggest issue. I just don't know that this movie is necessarily showing you anything you haven't seen before. Don't get me wrong, it does a lot of those familiar things well, but I tend to personally gravitate towards concepts that go in unexpected directions. And the Boogeyman really didn't do that for me overall. In fact, a lot of it felt very forgettable. I think it's worth a one-time watch, because there's not really anything in it that's all too egregious that's going to make you hate yourself for dedicating some time to it. But when it comes right down to it, I did enjoy aspects of it, but overall, in the end, I did feel a bit underwhelmed. I may give it another shot at some point, given my unfortunate first-time experience, but as it stands right now, I'm going to say it was another flawed but decent watch, and that's why I'm going to give it the Cathouse.
Saved by kitty litter.
Y'all be cool. Right on.